Hi, I'm Howard Spence. I'm Eaton County Commissioner, and today I want to share with you an experience I had when I attended the Michigan Department of Civil Rights Commission meeting, which was held at the Lansing Center here in Lansing, Michigan. Today, the Civil Rights Commission met for the purpose of receiving public comment on a proposal that they had that would have allowed them to uh, issue an interpretive statement about whether or not the word sex as it appears in the Michigan Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act encompassed the concept of sexual orientation as well as uh, the more limited concept of what sex might mean. Some of the other jurisdictions, including the Sixth Circuit, have interpreted similar statutes and uh, regulations to uh, allow the word sex to actually be more encompassing. And so the Michigan Civil Rights Commission had earlier sought written public comment, which they received and which is available on their website. And today they wanted to allow a broad segment of the community to come forward and to make comments as to whether or not the more expansive and inclusive uh, definition of sex should be interpreted or concluded from the language presently in the Michigan Civil Rights Act, the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act. And there were approximately a couple hundred people who did show up to make comment. 150 people turned in position statements, and probably about 100 people actually took time to give a 2-minute presentation about their views on whether or not the Civil Service Commission, the Civil Rights Commission here in Michigan should issue that interpretive statement. I also made a statement, a public statement today on the issue. I am supportive of the requests that came from the Michigan Equality Organization, which was also supported by the Michigan uh, uh, American Civil Liberties Union chapter, which would have uh, allowed the Michigan Civil Service Commission to follow the trend which is now starting to develop across our nation in both state and federal courts and administrative agencies, whereby the word sex, which is common or typical in a lot of the discrimination, prohibition statutes, uh, encompass this broader concept. And I was supportive of the interpretation being more expansive. Uh, I took the position that discrimination generally is something that should be prohibited when it has a disparate or unfavorable impact on any part of our population, which deprives that population element, especially a minority population element, of basic civil liberties, rights, and or privileges which the majority might enjoy in our community. And although the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or GLBT community in Michigan is a relatively small one in terms of percentage, there are many people who are within that classification. And as appeared in the public testimony today in support of the expanded interpretation, many of the Michigan citizens and residents are fearful for their well-being. The Michigan Civil Rights Commission itself noted that there were over 300 complaints within the past year alleging discriminatory, retaliatory, or even violent acts against members of the GLBT community. And I was also supportive of the expansive view. Basically, this boiled down to the same type of discussion or argument that you're seeing across the nation. A small group of alt-right, sometimes ultra-conservative Christians have taken a position that allowing gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgenders to have protections against discrimination violated their Christian rights and their liberties to practice their religion as they desired. So essentially I took the position that the Christians who were attacking the prospect of giving discrimination protections to gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgender people were advocating in the name of Christian love a type of discrimination and hatred which I'm sure they would not themselves have enjoyed being the subject of. And I took a personal interest in this topic because in the past I've spoken out in favor of GLBT rights right here in Delta Township in Eaton County when the Delta Township Board of Trustees in 2013, I believe it is, were considering adopting an ordinance that prohibited discrimination based upon gender, sex, sexual orientation, and essentially adding on a local ordinance level GLBT protections. And as a result of my speaking out in favor of less discrimination in our community and more equal opportunity and treatment of all people of goodwill and who were law-abiding citizens, there was an element in the community that resented that. And again, it was an ultra-conservative religious segment which we see across the nation. And as an elected official, I faced a very significant election challenge based upon what I view as the appropriate way to deal with discrimination and the rights of all of the residents and citizens here in our county, our township, and indeed in our state now. So the hearing itself lasted approximately 2.5 hours, and at the conclusion of the hearing, then the Civil Service Commission deliberated publicly about the topic, and I think it's an interesting study, both politically and also in terms of how independent administrative agencies interact in the political scene. We all know that on a national level, this is a hot button topic, and it raises emotions, and a small, relatively small religious segment which has apparently claimed for itself the mantra or right to represent what Christianity is, has begun to attack rights of minorities, including gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people, by claiming that other people not being discriminated against actually discriminates against them and what they see as their religious rights. And during my comments, I pointed out that I had seen this argument before. I've been around a long time, and I remember back in the 1960s when from some of the same ultra-conservative so-called Christian or alt-right Christian pulpits, we had the same message, the same themes, the same rationale raised by people claiming to find umbrage within the Judeo-Christian Bible that condemned other people who were minority for religious reasons. Back in the 60s, the almost identical arguments were raised to attack the right of minorities, blacks, Asians, Latinos, to have sex outside of their own race or even get married. I think most of the people watching this video are familiar with the fact that the many states, especially the ones in the Bible Belt in the South, had enacted laws that made it felonies punishable by up to 10, 15 years in prison for people of different races to have sex with one another, and also if they got married, that was a crime, and they would go to prison for extended periods of time. And it was not until the U.S. Supreme Court intervened to reject all of the religious arguments that were raised to justify keeping the races separate, that we began to see some miscegenation or mixing of the races. And I have to say that within the 50 years since Loving versus Virginia became the law of the land, when the United States Supreme Court ruled that those types of religious limitation laws violated the rights of minorities. Since that time, our communities have changed greatly, as well as the attitudes of our community. Some of those same religious groups in the past that condemned as sinful and an abomination to God for there to be miscegenation or interracial marriage, those same congregations and religious organizations are coming forth now to say that allowing, for example, GLBT people to get married, which is now the law of the land, or for them to have basic protections against discrimination, in fact, sometimes against violence. These religious groups are now saying that is an infraction or violation of their religious rights and freedoms and liberties. And of course, I am not buying that particular argument, and so I was happy to speak out against it when I taught discrimination and employment law at the master's level. And in my career, I have seen that type of argument raised where people who claim to be full of love for others rush to oppress them, to discriminate against them, to denigrate them and place them in a lower level of humanity and rights because their God, in their opinion, requires that. And I reject that. I myself am a Christian. Many of the people who were speaking today in favor of a broader interpretation of the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act prohibition against discrimination based on sex also are Christians. And I made the point during my presentation that no one group speaks for God. They may think they know what God says, but just like 50 years ago they knew God frowned upon marriage, now their mores and their cultural perspective and the experience of being accommodated and adjusted to seeing interracial couples, that experience has mellowed to some extent their view and the view of their children as to what their God actually does require or condemn in the Bible based upon their particular interpretation. And I pointed out that even in the Protestant Christian world, there are over 230 denominations, breakaway groups, all claiming to be Christians based upon the same reading of the same scriptures, particularly in the New Testament. And yet, out of that 236 denominations, it's very difficult to even get two or three of them to agree as to what God has said to them in the same scriptures based upon the interpretation, the language in the holy text, this type of thing. So with that background, I urge the Civil Rights Commission to take a more broad view. I pointed out that they need to understand, just like the Christians do, that there is a civil and there is a religious world. And Jesus Christ himself in the New Testament admonished his followers, if they truly were his followers, to render unto Caesar or the government that which is civil or within the realm of what the government is there to do, and to render unto God, their God, our God, that which is of God. And a lot of the followers or alleged followers of Jesus Christ have yet to learn that lesson. And it seems that there is a large group of them who cannot be happy and feel like they themselves will find salvation unless they bring unhappiness into lives of others who believe differently or who may not even think that there is a God. And so with that perspective and with my civil liberties background, and with my experience in civil rights and seeing how hatred often raises its face in the guise of love or religion, I felt compelled, even though I've already been attacked, I think pretty viciously and in an unchristian way by some of these groups based on my support a few years ago for a similar ordinance at the township level. Uh, I thought that it was imperative for me and my conscience and my understanding of my own Christianity and what my God uh, expects of me in this life. I thought it was important that I take that step forward and to advocate and express my opinion and belief about whether or not people who were of the GLBT orientation or background uh, should be discriminated against. And as we all know, our legislature is becoming more and more conservative and unwilling to take the risk of stepping out and saying anything that would actually anger or alienate even one vote. And so they basically are doing polls to see within their own core groups who will speak in what way. And in Michigan, although there from time to time have been efforts to clarify whether or not the Michigan Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act actually protects people based upon their sex or sexual orientation. Uh, that's never been accomplished. The legislature hasn't been able to show that degree of profile and courage type of activity, and it's become a lot of doctrine, and many in government think that government is actually an arm of religion, which is contrary to even basic teachings in the New Testament for Christians and those who are disciples of Christ and follow his teachings. So that's the background. And what I have beyond my statement now is I have recorded the entire deliberations because, like I said, it's an interesting study in politics. It's an interesting study in lack of resolve to do the right thing. And I pointed out to the civil rights commissioners, I said, you are appointed, you took an oath that you would represent the government or civil aspect of protecting people in the state of Michigan against discrimination. So you should step forward, and if your own religious beliefs do not allow you to objectively look at the lives of people who believe differently than you do, then you should recuse yourself, or perhaps you should find a different type of enterprise or undertaking. It seems to me somewhat hypocritical to say that because you are a Christian, you are unable to administer a civil government, because in the United States, Michigan, we're not a theocracy. We are a people that are in a country that was established in a way that prohibited religion from becoming the government. There's a separation of church and state, which protects us all. The old saying, if they come for me in the morning, they will come for you in the evening. If they come for black people in the morning, they will come for gay people in the afternoon. If they come for Baptists or Lutherans in the morning, well, the Catholics had better watch out at night. And so that wisdom, which differentiates the origin of the United States from that of many other countries, particularly in Europe, that is a very basic, fundamental right and concern that affects me and those who believe in basic equity, social justice, and equality and protection of minorities, because that's what our Constitution basically does, and our courts are supposed to do, protect minorities from the power and overriding indifference or discrimination or even hatred of a majority. And that has kept our country going well. So with that background, I invite you to look at this deliberation by the Michigan Civil Rights Commission and enjoy or just shake your head or do whatever. Ultimately, there were several people on the Civil Rights Commission who obviously were very troubled because they thought that the discrimination which resulted from a failure to read the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act in a more expansive, inclusive way led to discrimination that was wrong, but based upon advice from the Department of Attorney General on an informal basis, not yet even written, that it was actually prohibited or illegal is the characterization for the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, which is an autonomous constitutional entity charged with preventing discrimination. It was, according to the Attorney General present, unlawful for them even to accept complaints, to investigate them from GLBT people, which is a very interesting thing. And some of the majority, apparently, of the Civil Rights Commission wanted, first of all, to get a formal opinion from the AG, to jail the AG in place, because the AG is basically a political person who has been feeding his political career off of a core group of ultra-conservative people who were present today advocating against expanding civil rights protections against discrimination. And so, in fact, the Attorney General of Michigan was one of the few Attorney Generals that ultimately took the wrong side of history approach to whether GLBT people should be allowed to have civil marriages, not religious marriages, but civil marriages. And of course, we all know that within the past few years, the United States Supreme Court gave a good spanking to that philosophy. And now in not only the state of Michigan, but across the country, GLBT people do have the civil right under our Constitution and the Equal Protection Clause to get married if they so desire. So enjoy the deliberation of the Civil Rights Commission. Sorry to take so much of your time. Some people will dislike my comments. Some people will understand them better. But I'm here to talk about that which I think is lawful, that which is fair and equitable. And more all, I'm here to talk about what I think my God tells me in those same scriptures that many who appeared to rebuke the Civil Rights Commission from expanding to prevent discrimination thought. Enjoy, and why not pray about it too? Thank you for listening to this.
We are going to do a round robin. I will start to my right. Ask every commissioner to ask a question or make a comment. They have 2 minutes to do that, each one of them. We will go around 3 times. And then 3 times. And at the end of that, so every commissioner will have 3 chances to ask questions or make a comment. At the end of that, I will ask for a motion. But before we get started, I'm going to ask Director Arbalou to give us a rundown of the options that we have before us today. So, Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, the request July 24th was for an interpretive statement on the meaning of sex by Equality of Michigan to include sexual orientation and gender identity. We prepared and circulated to all the commissioners a memo of our view from the department's perspective, copies that you all have, but I have brought extra copies in the event any of you wish a hard copy. In that write-up, we proposed 4 options that you had. Any one could be offered as a motion. 1, first option, having reviewed the request, the commission declines to provide an interpretive statement at this time. However, it directs the department to begin accepting complaints based upon allegations of discrimination based on sexual orientation and/or gender identity. Option 2, the Commission advises that it currently interprets the use of the word sex and therefore the protections afforded by the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act's prohibition of discrimination based on sex do not include discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Option 3, the Commission advises that it currently interprets the use of the word sex and therefore the protections afforded by the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act's prohibition of discrimination based on sex to include discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Tied to option 3, assuming it is yes, if the Commission adopts option 3, finding that the term sex is generally inclusive, it would have the option of also including an additional provision indicating that the Commission's interpretation of the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act prohibitions may not be applied in a manner that infringes upon the constitutionally protected practice of religion. And option 4, having reviewed the request, the Commission declines to provide an interpretive statement at this time and moves to place this item on the table. Madam Chair, those were the 4 options that we presented, and we know there are a number of other preliminary procedure issues that you and the Commissioners may seek clarification.
Thank you, Director. And I will let also make sure that the Commissioner understand that they have the right to ask for a legal opinion from our AG representative at the divisional level, Mr. Ron Robinson. So at this time, I will, or direct their question to our Director as well. So at this time, I will start with Commissioner Voss. Commissioner, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, we've heard a lot of compelling arguments today, and I've actually kind of lived through all of them. I sit here though, and regardless of my personal beliefs, I believe that every person has rights to have their civil rights protected. That being said, what I don't know is what our ability is under the law, and I would like to ask Ron to expand on it.
Thank you, Commissioner. First of all, I have to indicate that my opinion is being provided at the division level only. Currently, either Michigan statutory law or Michigan case law supports Equality Michigan's request that sex, as defined by the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act, includes gender identity or sexual orientation. As a rule, such interpretation would require a legislative determination.
Okay, Commissioner Voss? Okay, Commissioner Tolliver?
Thank you. I've had 100 things going through my mind as I sit here, but one of the things that I note, since January 2014, when I started with this wonderful commission as a volunteer commissioner here, I have asked for this commission to champion, and rightly so, the issues of intersect between our constitutional religious liberty and those of the LGBT community. I've asked for that because there is an intersect for the groups that we could have and should evaluate with respect to the intersect of who wins in certain circumstances and who prevails. And that is where hearings are appropriate. This was not a hearing today, but I've heard a lot today. But this was not a hearing. We've had Flint water crisis hearing, and our authority is to take information at the hearings, similar to what we did in the Flint water crisis hearings, and to present to the legislature our recommendations so that they would be compelled based on the information that we provide them about civil rights here in Michigan. And that is what is important that I wanted to champion, and I think that we should. We did get a request, and the request came from Equality Michigan, and I would argue that we do not have the legal authority.
Thank you,
to do that.
Commissioner.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Commissioner Rezio. I'm going, just before we start, Director Arbolo, could we have the timer back again? We don't have a timer. You know, it's difficult for one of us to keep
I'm
time.
going to yield my time.
If we could have somebody keep the time for us. Thank you.
I'm bringing right now.
Thank you very much. We appreciate all that. I mean, it's not an easy job.
She'll be up in 2 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Director. And thank you. Okay, you tell me when you're ready. Okay. And if you can turn your phone toward me so I can see the time. No, I can't see it. Okay. Commissioner Rezio.
I want to thank Equality Michigan for making their request, putting the matter out here in the public light, because it does affect people's lives explicitly, whether we experience that or not. I think we heard many examples that things are happening in our community. And since I've joined the commission a few years ago, I continue to learn on a daily basis all the things that people are facing and how it impacts them and impacts others. And I think we all would agree, no matter what our stance is, I think we all would agree that we do not have a state law that explicitly prohibits LGBT discrimination in employment, housing, or public accommodation. I think we can all agree to that it just does not exist. So there's been a lot of comments on both subjects of the matter, and at this time, those would be my comments on the first round.
Thank you, Commissioner. Colbeck?
Thank you, and I'd like to thank everybody who testified here today. And we're very passionate about the issue, but also respected each other's opinions, which in an open forum, sometimes it is difficult when there's so many different identities and so many different opinions. And that I am very grateful for, because it begins the discourse of the dialogue and addressing the issue that's fundamental to a lot of people, and that's what the Constitution protects, and that's providing civil rights, civil liberties, and protection against discrimination, which the Elliott-Larsen Act, will protect. On the issue regarding, diving deeper in terms of the many legal arguments, I won't go into, because that's probably for another hour or so discourse. But I just wanted to assure you that whatever goes forth from this commission hopefully will allow people to have continued dialogue to address this very important issue for everybody. And I want to thank Equality Michigan and the commissioners and the department for bringing it to this point in time in history. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Colbeck. I guess it's my turn now. I just want to add my voice to Commissioner Kopak. This required a lot of work on the part of the department, as well as the commissioner, with all the documents that we were provided with and the questions that we have posed to the department, and deliberated while we were reading, just kind of understanding what the issues before us. I want to also thank Equality Michigan for bringing this issue before us, and for everyone that came here to give us their views. Since I've been on the commission, I was appointed in 2012. This has come before us, and it's a long-standing issue that we've had to think about, talk about, and now it's coming to us in a more formal way. Discrimination is always something that we are entrusted to take a position on. So there's many different views here, and we need, with the understanding that we need to be respectful of everyone. Discrimination is still discrimination, and what I still need to understand is, I would like to listen to my fellow commissioners, because there's a few other questions that I have on my mind that I still need to hear. So I'm gonna pass on the time to Commissioner Hunt.
First, let me thank the Department of Civil Rights for all the work that they've done, from all our requests that we've had, all the research that they've provided us. I think in the state of Michigan, citizens want to be treated the same, with the same rights for everyone. What I've heard today is approximately 150 people who may have talked or completed forms. That shows there's a commitment here for us to listen and come back to the state of Michigan, to fellow commissioners, to our residents, with our decision on how we believe in what we've heard and all the research that's been done. I think bottom line is, should every person who has blood running through their veins be protected by the state of Michigan? That's a simple question with a difficult answer, depending on who you're talking to. So tonight, listening, I was taking plenty notes, was really helpful to hear what our residents have to say, as well as hearing what our commissioners have to say. Thank you.
Commissioner Stackwell.
Thank you. First, I want to compliment each and every person. The civility in this room we're taking every day, this wouldn't be happening today. The way we all treat each other today, what it should be every single day. And it was a pleasure to be a part of. This is a very difficult day for me. This is not an easy decision. My stomach's been churning the whole time. It's not because of lunch I had here, by the way. And it's a very, very difficult decision, because for me, I got involved a little bit in politics, and when you hear judges talk, judges have to rule on the law. And a lot of times judges make decisions, they don't get to do what's in their heart, they have to do what the law says. So after hearing what the Attorney General says about, I need to know that I have the ability or have the power to make this decision, because most of the people that came up and spoke told me their feelings, and I agree with their feelings. Nobody should be discriminated against for any reason whatsoever. This country wants to discriminate against African Americans, women voting. I'm Jewish, we're discriminated against, and I believe in my bottom of my heart, nobody should be discriminated against. But a couple people got up there and said, well, they've been in the legislature and they didn't do it. Well, the legislature is voted in by the people. And this makes a very, very difficult decision, because the legislative body is voted in by the majority of the people, not the 8 people here who have been, chosen by the governor to sit here and represent. It's a very, very difficult decision. We have 4 options here. I'm weighing them very carefully, and I just want to say from the bottom of my heart that if we can treat each other like we did today, it was much better than I thought it was. It was a magnificent day in terms of civility that we had for each other. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner South. I will turn back again to Commissioner Voss. Second round.
I'm going to pass this around.
Okay, we'll go to Commissioner Tolliver.
Thank you. I will try to keep within my 2 minutes here.
So there were 3 branches of government: the legislative branch that makes the law, the executive branch that implements the law, and the judicial branch that interprets the law. We've been hearing, based on testimonies here, that it's high time that somebody does something about it. It's time for an interpretation for the current day. We need to expand Elliott-Larsen and open the door and add to that. All of those things I did hear from supporters, but to manage the expectation, we are not here to expand law. We cannot make law. We are not lawmakers. That is not within our purview. We just cannot do it. I would make a law in Michigan to stop the 27,500 abortions in Michigan. 14,000 happen to be African-American babies. That's the law I would make, but I'm not the lawmaker here. Those are the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that I would start with here in Michigan, of 14,000 black babies who are killed each year. 7% of the population make up 51% of the abortions, and yet we still have Planned Parenthood and other entities that are freely allowed to do that. So in terms of justice, social justice, that's the first one that I would start with. But we do not have the right to make law. We do not have the right to create law. And as much as I feel for certain things that I consider unjust, we are limited into our abilities to do that here. So I would vote for number 4, that we have hearings, public hearings.
Thank you, Commissioner Tolliver. Thank you. Commissioner Rezzio.
There's a couple of comments I wanted to reference from the people who talked today. One was the separation of church and state. And I think many people welcome that. The church welcomes being separate from the state, and the state welcomes being separated from the church. It reminds me of the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. Yet, here we are, comments that divide us. We stand divided, which is not good. And liberty and justice is not felt by all. And that is not good as well. And we just came from a training, some of us came for a training, which reminded us that government has a track record for intentionally and unintentionally affecting parties with its wills and policies to people's disadvantage and advantages. And that impacts the trust between government and the people that it serves. And we are just one avenue of that government here in Michigan under the governor. I think there was one who was in Group E. A gentleman talked about the work that was done in Utah. And that's something that I think we should do here in Michigan, because it's coming. And we have to work together so that we can be working for liberty and justice for all. And part of what we do is that we fear what we do not understand. And so the more we can educate ourselves, the more we can understand, and the more we can come to a resolution.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, my turn. I just need to ask again regarding the interpretive statement, because I've heard the 2 different sides, one saying that we don't have authority to have an interpretive statement, and then again, the other side saying yes. So again, I would like to hear it from both Mr. Robinson, and because some of the documents I got is that based on Rule 37.23, the Commission may adopt interpretive or procedural guidelines. So can you reconcile those 2 facts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, the commission rules do provide for an interpretive statement. This situation is somewhat unique in that what you're asking for would be a modification of the way the statute was intended to be applied. And as such, it would cross the realm into legislative making. And that's where that interpretation should be reserved to the legislature. That's my view from an informal opinion at the division level.
Okay, so therefore that's an informal opinion.
That is correct.
So what would be my recourse if I wanted a formal opinion?
There's a process by which you can appeal an opinion at the division level, and that process would include a request for the Attorney General to issue a formal legal opinion.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hunt?
Attorney Robson, can you also share with me, when I look at option number 3, it says, Commission advises that currently interprets the use of the word sex and therefore the protection afforded to it by Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act, prohibited discrimination based on sex to include discrimination in sexual orientation. If we said yes to that, are we saying that we want to ensure, whether we change what's in Elliott-Larsen or not, is that employees who, residents who sexual orientation is different than what's on their birth certificate, for example, will be able to be protected under the law and not be discriminated against. That is key.
Well, as the commission has previously found, that there is discrimination against the LGBTQ community and urged our legislature to adopt an amendment to the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act that would specifically include protection for that community. We don't even get to, quite frankly, we don't even get to legislative, to the rule, the option number 3, unless we cross the threshold that the commission has authority to make such an interpretation, which at my informal division level opinion, you do not. So we do not even get to the issue of number 3 until we cross the threshold whether or not this commission has the authority to make that interpretation.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Sapwa?
That's my time.
Okay, we will go back to Commissioner Voss. This is our last round.
Ron, what would be the ramifications, or what would be, if we did go with Proposition 3, you said we crossed that line. What is that line, and where does that lead us?
Should the commission choose to issue a favorable interpretation contrary to the advice of the Attorney General's office, it would be unlawful. The commission, in its capacity, would then waive its right to governmental immunity and be subject to lawsuit.
Okay, Commissioner Tolliver.
Thank you. I'm going to try to use my 2 minutes wisely. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and for coming, and the department and the commissioners, and for all those who have shared. This is, as a Christian, Christ is not on trial here, and neither is the LGBT community. It is not. The question before us is, do we have the authority to issue the interpretive statement, and we do not, period. Nonetheless, there are things here that the supporters of this are looking for. And just to be clear, the law allows for civil rights protections for marital status, for height and weight, so it is not just for race. There are other factors in the civil rights law, Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act, to be included. And it is not for us to discriminate against anyone for seeking recourse. But the bigger issue for, I believe, the supporters of this, for us to expand the law or to issue an interpretive statement is based on the ability to recover monies as well for discriminatory acts, because we do recoup for those who are discriminated against money, and money is where millions of dollars for those who have been discriminated against. There are, I am not in a position to argue with anyone who's been discriminated against. Been there, done that, and in my family, and have seen it. It is not something that is acceptable in our society. We do not have the authority to make this change, but we should have hearings and have a more formal discussion and focused discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner Tolliver. Commissioner Razio?
Thank you. Where to start? This was definitely although there's been talks from this commission, it was before my time, so for me, this was a very good step towards that direction that Commissioner Tolliver points out. I further would encourage us to work with all parties, whether it be the Equality of Michigan and the supporters of that thought, or for those on the other side, legal on both sides, Christians on both sides of the matter, and work towards what is the defined desired result of the actions for all parties being impacted. What do we want for the LGBT community, and what do we want for those that have to deal with the laws that are being considered and enacted? We only need to look at the East Lansing issue and the farmer, where the matters are still being resolved. And so I just want to avoid having to challenge ourselves when we make a decision. You can see what happened with the religious protection law in Indiana, the North Carolina bathroom laws, and thank you, Commissioner Tarper, for the East Lansing court, how they cannot ban vendor who was opposed to the gay marriage. Again, I just say we need to define the desired result of the action for all parties being impacted and involve the community to help us with the strategies for equity.
Thank you.
Mr. Robbins, I wanted to ask you regarding, the first item for the commission's statement. And it states that we would decline to provide an interpretive statement. However, it would direct the department to begin accepting complaints based on allegations of discrimination. Would that be in the purview of, the statutory Elliott-Larsen Act, the Michigan Constitution, and any other statutory language that may bring up discriminatory practices against an individual in this community?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. The department, the option number 1 would face the same problems as option number 3, in that if the commission were to direct the department to begin taking complaints, you would be asking the department to take action which the Attorney General has said is unlawful, and would waive their governmental immunity and allow the department to be sued in court. The unique part is that in taking advice contrary to the Attorney General's office, you would not then avail yourself of the protection and legal advice of the Attorney General. The department would be on its own, and individuals who took that action would be on their own. That's just the way the law works.
So are you telling me that the LGBT community does not have the same protections as any other citizen in the state of Michigan to file discriminatory complaints?
As the law currently states, they are not protected under the statute, either statutory law or case law. That's all I'm saying. As the law currently stands, and that rule should be is designed for interpretation by the legislature.
Thank you, Commissioner Kopak. I'm a little bit perturbed, that really we have no recourse. Because this, in my mind, discrimination is discrimination. Nobody should be discriminated against. And we are the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. We are here to prevent discrimination. And at this juncture here, we're told that we have no recourse, that we know about discrimination, but there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, I don't know, we held this meeting here, we listened to all these people, but at the end, there's nothing we can do. That's what we've been told. I mean, to me, that's just not right. That's not right. What are we elected, what are we appointed to do then? We're not appointed to just hold meetings. We're appointed to give our opinion. That's why we were selected. And we have no recourse at all. I don't know. I would like I think we need to get an official opinion from the Attorney General. I would request that we get an official opinion.
A motion.
Can I make a motion to ask for an official opinion from the Attorney General? Do I have a second for that motion?
Madam Co-Chair, we should allow everyone else to speak and then go into our deliberation.
Okay. All right, we can do that, and I'll reserve my right to make that motion.
Are you asking questions?
Well, I was asking Mr. Robinson there. What is my recourse?
As I indicated, one of your recourses would be to ask for a formal Attorney General opinion on this particular issue. My opinion is only at the division level. So that would be one option. The main option that is available to the commission is to ask for a formal Attorney General opinion.
Thank you. I mean, this exercise was really for nothing, pretty much. I mean, we have asked for a formal opinion. Okay, Commissioner Hunt?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Southwell?
I would like to I'd like to make a motion to vote for number 4 and table this. And I think today was not a waste of time. I think that we heard from both sides and it was an incredible day to hear stuff. And I think the Civil Rights Commission does have work to do. But we can only do the work that we're told that we can do that's legal. And right now, the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act tells us what we can do, and if we want to add on, then people may have to go to the legislature according to the Attorney General. So, it's been taken up there before, and the fight will have to continue. I mean, I agree with you. I don't think anybody should be discriminated against. We are. So, can I make a motion on number 4?
You can go ahead and make the motion. And
Support.
Do you want me to, do I need to read it specifically?
Did I? For clarification, is Commissioner Sakwa making a motion, and did I hear a support?
From Commissioner Tarver, support.
Any discussions?
What does that doesn't prelude us from making a formal request from the Attorney General, does it?
I don't believe so. Does it preclude us from making a formal request to the Attorney General?
Madam Chair, are you asking that of the Executive Director, or are you asking that from the Mr. Robinson?
Mr. Robinson.
Option number 4 reads, having reviewed the request, the commission declines to provide an interpretive statement at this time and moves to place the item on the table. That would allow the commission to then ask for a formal opinion from the Attorney General.
So we can vote on the motion now?
Could you amend your motion to include that we would request a formal opinion of the Attorney General?
Madam Chair.
We can make a separate motion.
Yes, I would say,
We can make a separate motion to request a formal opinion. And I would want to say too, that, the commission doesn't really decline, in my opinion. Some of us don't decline to provide, we were barred from making an interpretive statement. It's not so much that I declined. I was ready to make a choice, but I'm been barred from making a choice.
So you want the amendment to say that the commission was barred from making a decision because of the Attorney General's opinion?
What? Excuse me. I'm sorry. Ma'am,
Yes, Commissioner Tolliver.
I know that there's a lot of passion in the room, and there's a lot of passion on the commission as well. But when we speak as a we need to speak as a we collectively through our vote. And we should not say we have been barred, or we have this, or we have that. Some of us do not feel that way. So some of us follow the rule of law and respect the law. Even though we may disagree with it, we respect the law. We are a nation of laws, and therefore we should not be using terms in our votes that are more flavorful and colorful or emotion-filled. We should just vote on what was presented and then deal with the other issue. That is my opinion.
Thank you, Commissioner Tolliver. I appreciate everything you said, but I had in the past received conflicting information. That's why. I have this opinion. I'm going to refer to Director Arbalou to
Yes.
clarify a few things for us.
yes, just for clarification, I think it would be wise, given that you have a discussion pertaining to the request for an interpretive statement, that before you close the discussion by adopting option 4, that I think it would be wise to first have a motion to seek a formal Attorney General's opinion on the issue, and with it, within that request, probably seek clarification in light of the 1978 AG opinion 5353 that affords the commission plenary powers. What I'm suggesting is, first, given, we need to step back a moment and to remember that Ron Robinson is indicating on behalf of, at the division level, that current state law does not support the request that Equality of Michigan is making to the commission to interpret the meaning of sex to include gender identity and sexual orientation. As such, I am hearing Mr. Robinson indicate that such interpretation should be left to the legislators to decide. That determination is being made at the division level, not at the AG level. Therefore, I would recommend hearing comments made by some of the commissioners that they direct the department to request a formal AG opinion on the opinion rendered at the division level.
And should that be a separate motion from the motion to table the issue?
Yes, I would suggest that that be first motion and then proceed to Commissioner Sakwa's motion. So if Commissioner Sakwa could kindly withdraw his motion at this time.
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, then I will make a motion to request the department to ask for a formal opinion from the Attorney General's office on
the division level's position regarding that state law does not support the request of Equality Michigan in making to the commission to interpret the meaning of sex to include gender identity and sexual orientation.
Okay, that is my motion. Can I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any discussions?
Yes, I have a discussion item. We are kicking the can. We have a group of people that came here for a decision, and that decision was either to make an interpretive statement or not. And we can vote no, which is what's been recommended by our Assistant Attorney General, Ron Robinson, who's been here for 4 years, whose opinion we have trusted in the past without having to go to the Attorney General, because he is at the division level, been trusted and assigned to the Department of Civil Rights. And because he is, his opinion does not necessarily agree with some on here, I do not believe we need to kick the can down the line. We need to make a decision, and the decision, according to number 4, is to decline to provide an interpretive statement. And then, based on that denial to provide an interpretive statement, because that is our position, that is what we can do, because to do so would break the law, and I'm not willing to break the law later. I'm not willing to break the law in the future. We should not break the law. We should follow the rule of law. We do not have the authority to do anything else. And as far as the position that we may not like from what Assistant Attorney General Ron Robinson said, we need to follow the law.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Or let's have a raise of hand, because I'm not sure everybody. Can you raise your hand if you're in favor of this motion? Thank you. Motion passed.
Can you indicate for the record those who have abstained or opposed, please? Madam Chair?
I oppose, Commissioner Tarver opposes.
Commissioner Tolliver opposed. Everybody else
So
was in
the
favor.
vote is 7 and 1 in favor of a request
No,
for...
6 and 1.
6. Who are the 2 voting against it?
Point of order. Can we just go back to what we were voting on? So
We're
there's
voting
2.
on the motion to ask the Attorney General for formal opinion.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Razio, you voted for? Did I see your hand up in the air?
I thought we were voting at number 4.
No, we are.
I understand that
Okay,
now. Thank you.
so,
I would vote against.
okay, then it's 4-2.
No, 6 to 2.
6 to
No,
2.
5 to 2.
5 to 2,
5
thank
to
you.
2.
5 to 2. Thank you.
With Commissioner Tarver and Commissioner Riccio voting against the motion to request directing the department to request a formal AG opinion on the division level's position that state law does not support the request of equality in Michigan in making the commission, in directing the commission to, or requesting the commission to interpret the meaning of sex to include gender identity and sexual orientation.
Thank you. Now, Commissioner Sakwa, you
Read number 4.
go ahead.
I have it there. Pardon me? Having reviewed the request, the commission was banned to provide an interpretive statement at this time and moved to place this item on the table.
Can we have a second?
I second.
Any discussions?
I think that, yes, I think the word banned is inappropriate in this setting. We are either declining or we are offering a interpretive statement. But I believe that the word ban is inappropriate and inflammatory and not relevant at this time. I think it should go back to the original language that we decline to provide an interpretive statement at this time.
Okay, any other comments?
Here's a second thought, because if we're gonna have the AG provide a formal response
It says at this time. It says at this time. So if you
Okay.
want to use the word barred, I give you the word barred at this time. and
Or
this
do you
time.
want decline? I mean, is that what you're asking?
I recommend decline.
It says decline already on.
At this time, yes.
Okay, can I have a restatement of the motion, please?
If Commissioner Stock was not opposed to the friendly request for amendment, I think the motion is to having reviewed the request, the commission declines to provide an interpretive statement at this time and moves to place this item on the table.
Works for me.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussions?
Whatever we do, we need to do it quickly, because as Commissioner Carver has made it known, there are real issues going on, and people's lives are being affected. So the sooner we can act, the better.
Okay. All in favor?
Can you ask if there's any opposition to this motion?
Any opposition to this motion? Okay. We will move on to new business.
I do believe that, as a result of this meeting, that we'll have future testimony and future hearings on matters that weigh on all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the other commissioner wishing to make a comment? Commissioner Review?
First of all, I apologize for misquoting the Pledge of Allegiance. I forgot to use the word indivisible, which was the whole point of my statement. You should have pinched me, Commissioner Carver. So I apologize for that. Second, like I said, I'm here to continue to be educated. A lot of education went on, so I agree with Commissioner's earlier comments. I did not think it was a waste of time. I was actually looking forward to this meeting. Read comments, read all the comments, except for the two that was laid on our desk here last minute, so I will read those to further educate myself. And I think we need to get the publicity out there more on this issue, because whether it's 300 or 500, and we have millions of registered voters, and we're not even hearing from 1% of our population on this matter. And so, as Commissioner Tarver said, we need to take the reins here and start hearing more from our constituents and community members. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Salvo?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Support. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.